me next introduce our next speaker, and that is, we're very blessed to have as our new, relatively new still, Associate Director, Kathy Hollings. She is a retired Federal Reserve Bank of New York official and therefore has quite a bit of knowledge about this topic of economics. Kathy, come and share with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, it hardens me to see so many of you that will take out of your busy days to come out to engage in fact-finding and in truth-telling. That said, it saddens me, deeply saddens me to have to say that as a nation we have been living on borrowed money and borrowed time. Now, I'm not going to set the stage where I think anyone should go into panic. We need to be calm about what we're going through now. And we will get through what we're going through now. But we have to face the fact. And the fact is that the Bush administration has engaged in reckless spending. It's been a reckless spending spree, and it should be stopped now. When Bill Clinton was in the White House, he was running some of the largest annual budget surpluses in our lifetime. But right now, the budget deficit is a record $10 trillion. Now, I want you to start to think, and I'm going to give you some numbers, what the budget deficit is going to be next year at this time if we don't take action now. And part of what I'm going to talk about is how the war has been funded and waged in Iraq. But I'm not going to talk only about that. We can't just be passive sheep anymore and let blank checks be written and just be taken along for a ride, because that's what's been happening. Now I ask you, when have we previously gone to war without raising any tax dollars? I don't remember one time. Someone may, but I don't remember one time. But this war has been funded with no tax dollars, entirely off the budget, with supplemental appropriations that go straight to the deficit, leaving a bill for our children and our children's children to pay. This also means that America has had to borrow money to pay for the war, and the funds have come largely from foreign investors. And in my view, this is gross fiscal mismanagement, and it should be stopped. Before I go on to war-related details, specific details, I want to talk a little bit about what's been in the media, because you need to connect the dots. You need to connect the dots with what they do show you, and then connect the dots to the numbers that they don't talk about very often. All told, the Federal Reserve has pumped $800 billion into the financial system. This figure doesn't include the untold sum that the Fed now plans to spend buying short-term debt so that companies can continue to pay their day-to-day operations. That hasn't been discussed. There's no dollar amount attached to that yet. And it doesn't include any of the money that the Treasury is laying out, like the $700 billion bailout fund, and that was their term, and the $200 billion that will be spent to prop up Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So start connecting all those numbers. They've had 14 months of working on the crisis, and the federal government, that means you and that means me, and that really makes me mad. They have a lot of serious money on the line, given how we've been managing this spending spree for 8 years. The annual federal budget is $3 trillion. So think about the numbers when you start to add them up in your head. And think again about what is the deficit going to look like next year if we continue on the course we've been on. The short answer is that the budgetary problems that this country has and will continue to face will continue to get worse if we stay on this course. Next year's deficit will probably be larger than what we faced in 1992, and I was around then, and in 1983. It's true that we've gone through periods of disruption financially before, but we didn't have a war like we have now that was being waged at the same time in the same way. And it's going to have a devastating impact on our economic affairs. Now, let's talk about the policy actions that have been approved so far. They're not long-term ones, number one. They're still working on them. So we don't have all the answers. And the policies that have been taken so far will not be able to take effect for 5 to 10 years. So you've got to really start adding this up and saying, is this a bill that you want to pay? Now, according to Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz, the U.S. government is severely underestimating the war. This is a 5-year war that we were told would last only 6 months, and that would virtually pay for itself through increased Iraqi oil exports. But we know that the direct cost that the Treasury admits is $845 billion. That's what they admit is the direct cost. The $845 billion in direct costs exclude interest on debt raised to fund the war. It excludes health care costs for veterans coming home and for replacing the destroyed hardware and degraded operational capacity caused by the war. So you don't have all the numbers unless you really seek the facts and try to dig out the numbers. According to Stiglitz, the true cost of the war is at least $3 trillion and could surpass what he estimates was the cost of the Second World War. And that was $5 trillion, adjusting for inflation. And that's without talking about all the latest things that have occurred in the financial system. You know, when you start adding these numbers, these are just Iraq-specific numbers. Now, this fiscal mismanagement is contributing partially, but significantly to the U.S. economic slowdown, and they're not talking about it. This money that goes straight to the deficit is contributing to the slowdown. The fact that we are spending $16 billion a month on wars in Iraq and Afghanistan has left very few alternatives for the Fed and the Treasury to deal with the current financial crisis. There's not a lot of liquidity. All our money is debt, practically. And even before a lot of this hit the press, banks that were running into trouble went to foreign sovereign wealth in the Middle East directly to recapitalize themselves. And that's why some of the banks you're not reading about today, you're not reading about them because they went to get foreign money directly to prop themselves up. They didn't want to wait around to find out, wow, will there not be enough if I go to the U.S. government? They were wise. They knew to go first to get the foreign dollars. So continuing down this road will certainly impede an economic recovery. Barack Obama has indicated in several speeches that he is not inclined to continue writing a $10 billion check for the Iraq war. But we know that John McCain is. Now let's talk about what the Iraqi public wants. According to a January 31st, 2006 poll that you all can get from worldpublicopinion.org, over 80% of the Iraqis feel that the United States plans to have permanent military bases in Iraq. And over 87% endorse a timeline for us to withdraw our troops. So shouldn't we be thinking about what the Iraqi public wants?
Yes.
Especially when we can't fund our own day-to-day needs here in this country. It's ridiculous.